So I'm Serah Macka. I'm the Africa Executive Director for the One Campaign. I think this opportunity calls for one thing, which is focus. It's clear that the geopolitics will do what suits their countries, their political base, not what suits Africa. So we need some custodians to be focused, to deliver what suits Africa. And I think that's why the AU in this moment is so important. We not only have elections at the AU, so we have a new crop of people coming in, and we can help shape their agenda of focus. We have the AU and the G20, which is significant. The AU, it'll be a learning curve for the AU, but nonetheless, the space has been carved out for the AU because we need more African voice. Now, there's no value in us having the AU have a seat and we don't have voice on that seat. So there's still some work to be done. We have South Africa at the AU as well, which has been there for years, but it's the first time Africa is holding the pen and the agenda to lead the G20 body. And remember, the G20 body's purpose is to stabilize global economy. So is South Africa leading that? Africa is part of the global economy. The focus is that Africa still contributes only 3% to global economy. Let's be very clear. The way we make power moves, the way we are able to negotiate for Africa is to increase that 3% to double digits. And for us to increase that 3% to double digits, we need to bring a lot more revenue and value to the global economy. But we're the greatest continent. We're the richest continent on Earth, I dare say. So we already have the opportunity. So as a collective, we must have a plan to add value to every single raw material that Africa has shipped out for, it feels like millennia, for the last 20, 30, 60 years. If you look at how Africa started with India, India has surpassed us with adding value. We are still shipping raw cocoa and raw cobalt and raw this. And the time has come for us to stop shipping raw and add value. Because until we can add value, get more revenue for African countries and African people, we don't have as much bargaining chip in the global economy. And then we can see that a president can wake up one day, decide that they don't really like our faces, they don't really like this line item, and we get jittery. How is it that a continent of 1.4 billion people is getting jittery because one country, largest country economically, has had to cut aid for PEPFAR or USAID? In the immediate term, there will be devastating impacts. But in the long term, Africa must say never again. Never again will be in a situation where countries can decide for their own benefit, their own political dynamics, and it impacts us so significantly. So I'm excited about the APRM's launch of the Africa Credit Rating Agency. It's going to act as a checker. It's the beginning, it's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the journey, because unfortunately, Africa is still not going to African capital markets to borrow money. We're still going externally to borrow money. So it's the external credit rating agencies that the external markets trust. But what the African Credit Rating Agency will do is make sure we can check methodology to methodology, the external, analysis to analysis to the external. So we can say, oh, hang on a second, you gave Senegal, for example, a BBB rating, but our assessment says actually Senegal should get a single B rating. So can we talk about, so you're bringing more conversation and dialogue so we get a better chance at properly pricing risk for Africa. So I think there's some good movements happening, but right now, African leaders, we need to focus on Africa. So I think two things. Number one, Africa doesn't have too much debt. Because when you compare our debt to GDP ratio, we're lower than like in the US or many Western countries that have 110%. Africa might have 60 or 40, but so it's not a debt issue. It's the quality and the price of debt problem. It's too expensive for Africa. So most countries will take some sort of debt to develop, and we are not absolved from that. But if our debt is priced, we have 500% more we pay for debt as Africa when we go to the capital market. Entirely too expensive. Greece and Senegal had the exact same credit rating. Greece got about a 2 to 3% interest. Senegal gets 8%. And it feels like 5% is not a lot. 5% translates to billions over time, compounded. So this is significant. So I think that the debt cost of capital issue is the issue du jour, is the issue of the day we need to tackle. But I also think there's a global financial architecture that we also need to tackle. Because guess what? Many of the design of the architecture happened in the 1920s. Our international tax treaty was formed. Guess who was not a sovereign nation? Many African countries. 1940s, Bretton Woods was developed. Guess who was not even on the table? African countries. They were designed when we were colonies, apart from Ethiopia that didn't do that. The rest of us. So we are now of age to say we need to redesign the global financial architecture because it does not incorporate our needs, our unique peculiarities. The Basel III framework that was developed in 2008, after the financial crisis, shores up the West so much and doesn't incorporate some of our assets on the continent, such as remittances. It's not incorporated. Yet, remittances eclipses Nigeria's budget, has eclipsed Nigeria's budget from time. That's how large it is. Kenya has a significant remittance inflow. Why isn't that part of the calculus? Or our assets is not appropriately priced in the Basel III framework to assess our sustainability and our resilience. So there are some things we need to go back to the drawing board to redesign, and that's why we are also talking about how to shift and change the global financial architecture, because it's not serving Africa. I mean, I think we've been going to COPs. I might be a bit controversial here. And I need us to take a good look as a continent and say, what do we get out of these big meetings that are overpriced? I actually think a more appropriate meeting was the Africa Climate Summit that Kenya hosted last year, and another one is going to be hosted 2025, I believe. The framing of that was spot on. What Africa is saying is, we actually have a disproportionately positive role to play in the green transition for the world, not for Africa. If Africa gets the resources to ensure that we can add value to our critical green minerals, we already have the natural endowment of geothermal energy, solar, wind power. Anything that is manufactured on the continent already has lower carbon footprints if we're using these cleaner sources of energy. So why isn't the world harnessing that? And we're building out manufacturing on the continent so that the world benefits. And so what we said at the Africa Climate Summit, and we continue to say today, is Africa is not having a begging bowl. We know what our assets are. We're in a partnership with the rest of the world. We can solve your problem. We have the assets. We bring the assets, you bring the resources. Together, we create products and intervention that the rest of the world, including Africa, benefits. So I think things like our credit rating, our critical green minerals, give us some very interesting pointers as to what we can do on Monday morning. I've always appreciated what Indonesia did with bauxite. They put a moratorium on bauxite and said, we as Indonesia are going to provide value to bauxite. If you want bauxite, you come to Indonesia, set up your plants, we create jobs for Indonesians, and we'll sell it at higher prices. And they took 5-7 years and they did it amidst threats and hardship and all the things that comes with when you decide to do something bold and courageous. We have a few minerals that are excellent for transition: cobalt, platinum, lithium. Where are we saying the world needs to come to Africa, set up its shop within the continent, add value within the continent, and we sell that at value-added rates, increase the revenue for the continent, enhance the climate transition that the world is going through, get jobs for our young people. There are teeming young people that are coming out in full force every year and will continue to come out. And this equation is balanced both for Africa and the world. What that takes is consensus from the AU. One country cannot do it by themselves. If Congo decides I'm not selling cobalt, Zambia might have some cobalt. If Nigeria decides I'm not selling lithium, there's lithium in many other African countries. But collectively, if there is a list of minerals, we say these are critical to transition, as a collective, we are going to make a statement and put attention on these and add value to Africa. I think it's a game changer. We need courageous African leaders who have vision and foresight here at the AU to make that kind of bold declaration so the citizens of Africa benefit. I think that's the plan. Yes, I dare say yes. We will make it a focus of the AU as advocates and Afrophiles, and the work of citizens and voice is to say we are demanding change that all of us benefit from. And we want to work with allies to make it happen. So I do think we can get to that place. It might take some time, but we can get there.